Hello and welcome to this Tungsten Replicator Masterclass training session. Today we're looking at working with cloud sources and targets. My name is Chris Parker, VP of Customer Success here at Continuant. So in this short course, we're going to just have a quick review of Replicator Flow. We'll then explore the cloud-specific prerequisites and look at the configurations for doing cloud extraction or cloud apply. So first of all, let's recap the Replicator Flow. So if you've looked at other training sessions or you're familiar with Tungsten Replicator, you will understand the basic flow of replication. You have the source replicator or the extractor, which extracts transactions from those binary logs that MySQL is generating and puts them into what we call THL files locally on disk. The target replicator or the applier pulls those THL files across the network, extracts them, and then applies them into that target database, whether that's a target MySQL instance, a cloud instance, or if it's one of our heterogeneous targets, the process is the same. The difference with a cloud installation when you are extracting from the likes of Amazon Aurora, Cloud SQL, is we have to do it a little bit different because with a regular MySQL instance, we have access to the binary logs on disk and we are able to work through them directly. With a cloud install, we don't necessarily have access to those binary logs. Therefore, we have to use the various calls for that solution to extract the binary logs effectively through the CLI. It's not the CLI, but it's those kinds of calls. The way that happens is the replicator will make the various calls to that database, whether it's Aurora or whatever the source is, to pull the binary log information out of the database and then writes it into what we call relay logs, which are then stored locally on that extractor host. The relay logs are then picked up by the replicator and used in the same process as if they were normal, regular binary logs. And that's how we do that replication. When it comes to applying into a cloud target, the process is pretty much standard. There's no difference there. The only slight complication with writing into those target databases is that we don't necessarily have the higher level of privileges that we expect and we would normally have in a standalone MySQL instance. And that's not something that you can grant. Therefore, we have to work slightly differently to ensure that we don't cause any errors. One example is that when the replicator typically writes into MySQL, it will disable binary logs. We can't do that in Aurora or those cloud environments. We can't disable binary logging. Therefore, we have to work around that and we have to have the various flags in place to tell the applier you're writing into a host that doesn't necessarily have the privileges that we would normally expect. So in terms of the pipeline flow, that's all exactly the same. The way the THL is created, the THLs move, the filtering, all of those things are the same. The only differences are how we extract. We can't go direct to the binary logs, so we have to pull the binary logs through the database interface. And when we apply, we don't necessarily have those privileges, so we have to apply slightly differently. Obviously, for the same reasons, we can't install the replicator directly on those hosts. So you would install your extractor or your applier on dedicated instances, and they would remotely connect out to that database. So this is what we refer to as an offboard extractor or an offboard applier. This same process, the offboard process, can be used for standalone instances as well, if you wish. No reason why you can't do that, but obviously it's the only way we can do it when we are working with the cloud databases. Prerequisites. Well, all the prerequisites for your extractor instance are exactly the same. You still need the various Ruby, Java setup, the operating system users, etc. That still needs to be in place, and all of those prerequisites are outlined in our documentation. Network, obviously the network ports for the replicators need to be open between the extractor and applier so that they can communicate and transfer THL files. Additionally, they then need the relevant permissions to reach out to either their source or their target database on whatever ports you have those running. For MySQL, there are some requirements. Obviously, you need binary logging, needs enabling in your source database, user accounts, setting up, all those kinds of things. But all of that is outlined in our documentation at docs.continuant.com. So how does this look in terms of a configuration? Well, these are two sample config files from an extractor and an applier. Now, I'm not going to do a demonstration of this. I've demonstrated how to install the replicator for regular MySQL instances in our other training sessions. And really, there is no difference in the process to do the installation. Download the software, extract it, install it. The only difference really is in the configuration file. So therefore, I'm just going to show you the config file on here. If you want to then go back, look at those other training sessions to learn how to do the actual install process, that's all covered there. But in terms of the configuration file, there are a few differences. I've highlighted in bold the differences here that are specific to a cloud install that you wouldn't necessarily need on a regular MySQL install. So first of all, we have these skip validation checks on the extractor. So I'll look at the left-hand side of the screen first. These 3 checks are basically just telling TPM, the install process, not to bother doing these particular checks, because even though you may have binary logs enabled in Aurora or Cloud, TPM doesn't necessarily have the ability to check that properly because of the levels of privileges that you're not able to grant within Aurora. So we just put that in there, it just stops TPM throwing errors for no reason. We then have the cloud install equals true line. So this is just telling the installation that we are installing against a cloud database. And that will also just disable some of the other checks and requirements that it would expect if we were running against a normal local MySQL. Finally, in the service section, the three lines at the bottom there, privilege master equals false. This is telling the installation that we don't have the super user privileges that we would normally expect. So it needs to adjust the way that it extracts. This also then is how it knows to extract those binary logs via the interface rather than having access to those binary logs on disk. The SVC extractor filters drop catalog data, so we're just applying a filter here to exclude catalog data that Aurora, for example, most specifically, they do a lot of other internal updates, heartbeat checks and things like that. This just excludes that from replication so that it doesn't replicate that information. It's not necessary, so we just get rid of it. And then the data source MySQL conf, we just point that to dev null. Otherwise, the installation is going to try and look for etc.my.cnf property file. So that just excludes that. In terms of the applier, we have a skip validation check there again, same reasons as the extractor. And we also have the cloud install. And then in the service section, we have the privilege slave faults and the data source MySQL conf to dev null. The privilege slave faults here again tells the applier that we don't have super user privileges, therefore we can't disable binary logging, so it just enables the various checks to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's it. That's all the difference that's required when replicating from or to a cloud install of MySQL. So what have we covered? We reviewed the Replicator Flow. We looked at the specific prerequisites for cloud install. And then we looked at how to configure for cloud configuration and extraction. So we looked at those configuration files. As I said, I don't cover the actual process of doing tools, DPM install, etc. on this session. That has been covered on the previous training sessions. And this is really just to talk about the difference in those configuration files and how cloud extraction differs from a regular MySQL extraction. So I hope you found that useful. If there is any more information you require, please do reach out to us via our usual support channels. And please do review our documentation. We have plenty of examples and more information in our docs about cloud extraction, cloud apply, and all of the various other configurations that you could apply to tune this even further. So thank you for your time, and I hope to speak to you again soon. Take care and goodbye.